Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:20, Wednesday, October 30th, and we will begin the Bastrop Special Planning and Zoning Commission agenda meeting. Let's start the call to order, please.
Christopher Toth. Ishmael Harris.
Here.
Keith Alborn.
Here.
Gary Moss. Here. Patrice Parsons.
Here.
Joshua Bingaman.
Here.
Jordan Scott.
Here.
David Barrow. Here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Let's see here. We're going to move to item 1B. Hello, Ms. Sylvia.
Hello. So welcome to our new members. Thank you to Christopher Toth and Nancy Robichaud, who is our impact fee member. Nancy, are you in the audience?
It's Regensburg, not Robichaud.
Oh, we're sorry about that. Not sure how we got that, but welcome.
Okay, thank you.
So you guys decided to join us on a very full house. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So I wanted to get sort of the big pink elephant in the room out of the way. When we posted the agenda initially, it was a hearing to consider and act. So when we spoke to the Planning Commission last, we were going to have Saturday workshops followed by the following Thursday's action at Planning and Zoning. And that was to engage the residents and engage the public. We decided to consolidate that because Saturdays are difficult to give up. And so we consolidated the Consider and Act as well as the workshop. So I got a bunch of calls that said that's not what we thought was going to happen. There hasn't been enough resident involvement, and so you had a very red agenda that had a lot of explanation on it. I want to remind folks that we've been talking about these amendments for a year now. We had our first code rodeo November of 2023, almost a year ago. We had the second one January of this year. Lots of sit with sills that happen every single month. We had the Planning Commission workshop on 8/17 where you had sort of hands-on into a lot of these topics. And then again, we're talking about this today. We will have more workshops. We will have more action as it moves forward along the continuum. And there will be an opportunity for a public hearing and public comment along every single continuum. But I wanted to make sure folks understood this is not the first time we're having the conversation about these topics.
All right. On to items 2, citizen comment. Thank you, Sylvia. Before we get to moving on to citizen comments, first off, I really appreciate the amount of citizens that showed up here tonight. It shows you guys and ladies and guys really care about what's going on. I ask that if you are signed up to speak, then when you do come up here and speak, that you are respectful. We definitely want to hear what you have to say. We want to make the right decisions. We're not here to be your enemy. And so if you feel the need to yell, please refrain yourself. We can all have a conversation like an adult and get through this, all right? So now, there are some of y'all who have signed up, and y'all have multiple items, and you can only speak on one. I believe if you know who you are, if not, I can go through the names and you can decide which item. I can write it down up here, or you can say it when you get up here. And then I also have a few of you who did not specify which item. So if you would like to specify which item, I will go call out the names right now, and you're more than welcome to get your citizen comment sheet and put down the agenda item. So I'll start.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Did you mean that they have 3 minutes and can speak on multiple items in that 3 minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry. Okay, let me clear that up. Multiple items each. You can't, no, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So you can do multiple items, right? But each individual 3 minutes, right? Do they need to do a separate one or separated?
No, you have over 30.
Okay, right. Okay. So we'll move to the ones that don't have an actual agenda item, and that would be Deborah Jones.
I'm in favor of the changes as presented.
Just all the changes? Okay. Lyle Nelson, you don't have anything, sir? Yes. I know. Just going to the next person. I saw him get up.
Mine's just general citizen comments, Mr. Chair.
Come again?
Just general
General
citizen
citizen,
comments,
okay.
not specific. I wanted to, as mayor, I wanted to welcome our 2 new members,
Okay.
as well as welcome back our 2 reappointments, Mr. Alburn and Mr. Bingaman. I really appreciate y'all's volunteerism. I don't envy y'all the task that's in front of y'all, but I really appreciate y'all's willingness to step forward. I do have a correction. I think that maybe our attorney could answer. I believe the citizens are entitled to speak on each individual item.
Okay. Okay, I misunderstood. My apologies, y'all. I wasn't trying to keep y'all from talking, I
You're good.
promise you.
But we appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarity. So we'll just move.
Madam
Yes.
City Attorney, is that correct?
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to the comments. Or do we want to get the clarity on the other people?
You have the giant list in front of you.
Okay. All right, well, we'll just move on to the citizen comments then. If y'all can bear with me, I have quite a few, and there's people who want to speak and don't, so I'm going to go through the list. And let's see. I cannot read this name. The address is 1316 Wilson Street.
That's me.
Oh, okay.
My handwriting is not wonderful.
No worries. So you have that you want to speak on items 3A through 3E.
Correct.
So she will get 3 minutes per each item?
I don't need that.
Correct. Okay.
I'll just wrap it in 3. There's too
Okay.
many people to
Can
speak.
you please state your name and address, please?
The name you can't read.
I'm trying.
It's Judith Hoover.
Okay.
Yes, and my husband and I chose Bastrop 45 years ago, and we've been in the restoration development business for that number of years. And what I would like to address today is the proposed amendments to the B Code. The B Code was a great process and came forth with a lot of good things to help Bastrop get into the 21st century. A few things that have been identified over the years as stumbling blocks are things like the parking. I know one developer was trying to lure people to Bastrop, big box stores, and the code said you have to park in back of the store, back entry. It just doesn't make sense. So that's one of the things that you're considering today. Another one is wanted to talk about the tree ordinance. I chaired the Parks Board for many years and served on it for many more. And it was during that time that we got the Tree USA city designation, and we're really proud of that. So to see a subdivision come in and overnight wipe out every tree on the lot, everybody knows what I'm talking about, was devastating. And so to secure better communication between the city and developers, there does need to be an amendment and consequences for doing those kinds of things. So for that, impervious ground cover, my husband and I have fought this tooth and nail. We've put down so much decomposed granite, you would think we lived in Marble Falls, but the idea was so that we didn't flood us and our neighbors, and it's a great way to have a natural look. So the idea of changing from 80% to a lower number as far as impervious, I think is a no-brainer. It needs to be done. And then the other items I'm for, and I hope I didn't go over my 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover. All right, up next, we have Debbie Moore. and she wishes to speak on topics 3A through 3E.
I don't need three per either.
Okay, please state your name and address, please.
My name is Debbie Moore. I live at 1306 Church Street here in Bastrop. And I had the honor and privilege of serving on planning and zoning for some 11 years. I was here and a member of P&Z when the B3 codes were first brought up. There were meetings and rodeos, as they were called then. It was participation by hundreds of people over several months because it was something new. It was something that had not been done before. And when it was finally brought to council, it was passed unanimously. So there's some good things in here. And I'm really, I don't know that any of you were here when the full explanation and the full why was brought out and why we're doing this. When it finally passed, we said from the get-go that there were things that needed to be changed because you were bringing up a code process that encompassed a whole city. Some things don't work in the historic district. A lot of things that do apply are things that are coming in the new development. And that's one thing that we're really concerned about is what are developers going to do to our city if they have unfettered access to whatever they want to do. And I am not anti-development. I am for controlled and reasoned out development so that we don't lose the charm of Bastrop. And I'm not sure that anything I say or anyone else says tonight will change votes that are going to come down from the city council. I think a lot of folks already have their minds made up. But what I would ask is that this commission and the city council take time, have more full-blown discussions, not a sit with Phil, although those are they're beneficial, so the people know that what's going to be discussed is the why and the wherefore of B3. It's been portrayed as one of the worst things that's ever come down the pike. It was meant to save our city while encouraging development in the right manner. There's no rush. The development is coming. We know that. It's like telling people in Louisiana, don't drill for oil because we're going to tax you. They're coming. We just want to make sure that our city is the city we want to see in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. All right. Up next, we have Jimmy Crouch. Hello, sir. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for the workshop and getting everybody's input. I'm Jimmy Crouch, 605 Buttonwood Street, Bastrop, Texas. And I want to just speak real briefly on all five items. I don't know that there's anybody more pro-development in this town than I am. That's what I do, and I like to see it organized and not where it's tearing everything up. So some of the development that's happened, I don't like. The 3A, the parking requirements, parking in the first or front layer of the house should be allowed. Most of the current residential parking is allowed in the first layer. Restricting it to the back of the property or the third layer will cause congestion on the street. Most of the vehicles could and should be parked on private property. The city should not be dependent on the public to use the back of their property for parking. Also, trees planted along the street and the right-of-way is an issue because there's not adequate space for the tree to grow and for the root systems to be placed directly on top of water and sewer utility lines, which will cause damage to the lines and also the trees upon repair of those lines. And an example of that, if anybody's been down Blakely Road behind McCoy's and behind Lowe's, you'll see the new apartments, and in the new apartments between the sidewalk and the curb, there's a 3-foot strip of land, and in that 3-foot strip, there's probably 20 trees there, and you can actually drive by there and reach out and touch those limbs. So that's not enough room for a tree to grow. In the future, it'll be huge and have to have maintenance done on it, and it's also on top of utility lines. So in drought conditions, tree roots are going to go to the water line, go to the sewer line, and start pulling at those to try to get the water. 3B, impervious paving. Reducing the amount of impervious paving is a good thing so that we are not adding to the storm drainage with minimal impact, especially in an infill area like the historic part. The existing culverts and drainage is not currently adequate. There's a $80 million drainage plan and a $100 million street maintenance plan that has been presented to the city that needs to be implemented at some point. So adding to those things isn't going to be good. Reduced of ADUs 2 to 1. The existing utilities and traffic is not adequately designed for the infill construction, especially in the historic part of town. You cannot add a lot of infill development without adding stress on the existing utilities and streets. The sewer, water, and street infrastructure is not designed for today's type of use. When they designed that and built it 50 to 80 years ago, there were no Amazon trucks, there were no home deliveries. Those type of things weren't there. If you add ADUs and multiple ADUs into a property, you're adding at least 2 cars per every ADU onto a place that didn't have them before. So that infrastructure wasn't planned for originally and would just tax and stress the existing utilities and existing streets.
Thank you, sir. Your time's up.
Okay.
Thank you. Does he get more time, or he still gets the 3 minutes?
I'm 3/4 through.
Do you all have a policy that would specify otherwise? If not, I think he would be allowed 3 minutes for each item.
That's what I was trying to
We
get
do
from the
not have a
jump.
policy.
But I don't want to take away, important things. So can we allow him to finish up?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I know I'm the chair, but I want to make sure we're being right. So go ahead, sir.
Okay, I've spoke of 3 of the 5, and I'll try to speak quicker. The tree protection. Who is not for better tree protection? The issue with the issue to me is the enforcement of the tree protection. We have tree protection in place. It isn't enforced adequately, and so that's why we have some of the issues that we have. I think if we can raise the fines for violations of the tree protection, or maybe raise the consequences for those violations, that maybe that will stop some. So that's the tree protection. I'm all for all the tree protection items because it was actually increasing the tree protection requirements. The Community Enrichment Fund. On your development, if you cannot or will not plan for park space on your development, you should be required to participate in this fund to help maintain our park system. Adding more people and usage to our current parks without any participation will just place the burden of maintenance on our already stretched and overworked employees and infrastructure for the parks. We really need to think about what we're doing to our infrastructure by allowing this new densification to the city. We're just adding stress to the already worn out streets and already worn out utilities here, and adding more buildings and developments internally for infill is just going to tax that even worse. And that's it. So thank you for letting me speak on those last 2 items.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Thank you. All right, up next, we have Cecilia Cerna. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Cecilia Cerna, 1104 Hill Street. First, I have a prepared statement. Okay. The B3 code is largely misunderstood by the very people hired and elected to ensure Bastrop's development. For example, in the agenda package for today's workshop, it states the existing code removed all facets of on-site parking, when in fact, it regulates on-site parking in the second and third layers. Another example of the lack of knowledge of the B3 code is the example of a house on Barbara Way that the agenda states had to reduce the size of the house from a 3-2 to a 2-2 to accommodate parking at the rear of the home, when in fact, they could have constructed a garage in the second layer just 20 feet behind the front facade of the house. These and other inaccuracies throughout today's so-called workshop are an attempt by the city manager to destroy the historic fabric of Bastrop that the B3 code is based upon. I encourage each of you to delay any action and instead establish a citizen committee to discuss each item in detail. If the city is unwilling to bring the code consultant back to assist with changes to the code, please take the time to do the right thing. Bastrop is at a critical moment in its development history. Let's do all that we can to get it right. And one of the things I wanted to mention also is how would it be possible to make an informed decision when the proposed changes are wrong, or at least describe things that are wrong. For example, on item 3A3, where it says parking in the first layer is currently not allowed, that is wrong. It is allowed. It also, in 4, it says to require parking to be included on site. It is allowed to be done on site. And those are just 2 examples. The proposed changes are full of errors or misstatements, and that just goes to show how terribly the code is misunderstood. Now, it's not fair to ask people to make informed decisions on things that are unclear, and I do think it would be in best interest to ask for clarifications or go through a workshop yourselves with the citizens so that we can all understand what the code is. This code is meant, and is a technical manual, and it's meant for people who are in that profession. So there's even the nomenclature. There's things in there that, unless you're in the business, you know what it means or what it could have a double meaning. For example, infill. Infill was something that was mentioned, and it was also referred to something that was incorrect. So I just hope that everyone will have more rodeos so that things can get cleared up. The code is not a horrible code. And even Sylvia said so back in April when we were talking about the Airedale district, that she didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there are good things to this code. It wasn't perfect, and that was admitted by the P&Z at that time. It just needs to be gone through, looked at, and see what's good about it. I mean, I don't know if people are aware, this code was an award-winning code. So there's got to be something really good about it. It's not all bad. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next. Yeah, we did loud. We're not going to do. Okay, Deborah Jones, please. You didn't say if you wanted to speak or not. I know you said something, but are you going to speak, or you just want me to say that you are in favor?
I just wanted to say I'm in favor of the revisions or the proposed changes. And I do want to point out I'm the chair of the Parks Board, and this has come up quite a bit, that we are going to be working with planning and zoning for new tree ordinances and for new park dedication and donations, and not donations, but contributions in lieu. So that's something that's on the agenda for us to work on for people who want to talk about trees and parks, is that all that's going to be updated. So
Thank you. Okay, we have Mike Goebel. Did I say that correctly? Goebel. Okay. Can you please state your name and address, please? And you're speaking on the preferred plant list.
Mike Goebel, 136 Carriage Court. I'm with Bastrop County Audubon Society, and I want to talk about the preferred plant list. I was getting ready for the meeting, and I was reading through the package, and I saw the existing list. I said, oh, man, there's so many great plants that are not on this list. And I turned the page, and I saw all the proposed plants, and so you did a really good job. I want to just mention a couple of these plants. The hackberry tree, I've been singing their praise of the hackberry tree for 20, 30 years. It's a superstar in nature. It supports hundreds of species of insects, which more bugs, more birds. And in the winter, they have red berries, and the birds depend on them to feed during the winter. About 3 years ago, we had some mountain bluebirds, and there's only been about 3 or 4 sightings in history. And where do we find the mountain bluebirds? Hackberry tree. So it's a great tree. Sea oats, they're great. Choose wisely. They can be quite invasive. Possum haw is a beautiful native plant. It looks like a yaupon in the spring and summer. In winter, it sheds all of its leaves, and it's full of red berries. The birds love them. It's a great plant for birds, so that's a great addition. Mulberry, terrific trees. In the spring migration, you want to find birds, find the mulberry tree. They will be in the mulberry tree just gobbling up the mulberries. Chinese pistache. I feel strongly both ways on this tree. It's a great tree. It's a pretty hardy tree, much more so than people realize. It's pretty ugly duckling when it's little, but 20, 30 years on, it fills out. It's really beautiful and has great fall colors. It's one of the few splashes of fall color we get around here, but it's a non-native, so it doesn't support many species of insects. So it's almost like planting a plastic tree. In terms of feeding birds, it's almost like it's a plastic tree. It does provide habitat, but they're not going to get a lot of insects off of that tree. I would suggest, one more tree I would suggest for the list is our native black willow. It's a great tree. It's much more drought hardy than people think. It's great for erosion control on stream banks, river banks, and it supports, again, hundreds of species of insects. The birds love these trees. You go birding along the Colorado River during migration, the willows are full of birds, full of warblers, and they really like them. Hornsby Bend, before they shut them all down in March and April, you'd go over there and yellow warblers would just come swarming out of the willow trees. So native black willow is another great tree to add to the list. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. All right. Next up, we have Jared Herska. Did I get that correct? Howiska. I'm trying with the writing. All right. All right, can we get your name and address, please, sir? You have 3 minutes, and you're here to talk about growth and the B3 code amendments.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jared Haruska. I live on 1105 Buttonwood Street. I was glad to hear that about the hackberry trees, for one. I've lived in Bastrop for almost 6 years. I came here from Austin, Texas. I lived in Austin since 1984, where I observed a situation that invited growth at any cost with little foresight or apparent oversight. What I see in Bastrop, which is a town that I've come to really love, is that growth is a sure bet here. We have the unique position to play our cards for growth that will be intelligible to our future generations. We can learn from every Round Rock, Cedar Park, Georgetown, etc., to see for ourselves what they did and did not do right. Some questions I always have in these matters are affordable housing, affordable for who? And in my opinion, the density myth is a sham because I've never seen the infrastructure to match it be put forth. To paraphrase our old friend Lippy, there is no do-over here. These changes are good for our growth, and I agree with amendments 3A through 3A through 3E, and I thank the city for bringing these forth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, up next we have Tom Dickey. And so, since you can go ahead and do both of those items you talked to me about.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Name, address, and 3 minutes,
Yes,
please.
yes.
Thank you.
So my name is Tom Dickey. My official address is 1302 Darter Lane in Austin, Texas, although my wife would argue with you and with me that my address is 601 Chestnut. 7 years ago, my wife and I purchased Neighbor's Kitchen and Yard. And when we did so, we had approximately 16 employees, which included my wife, my daughter, and myself. This year, we're running payroll somewhere in the 65 to 70 employee range. 3 years ago, we purchased what is known as the Crossing. And so we have become part of what I would consider the downtown economic engine. On Tuesday night, we won, or earned, some people would say, 13 awards in the Best of Bastrop County competition. And this includes, well, my favorite, the best pizza, but it also includes things like the place where people want to bring their out-of-town guests, the best dining experience, okay? And we even have, the kid-friendly, which I'm really trying to get us off of that list, okay? We host over 120 musical acts every year, and we are one of the hosts of the Bastrop Music Festival. The part of being an economic engine in downtown is our employee base. Okay, and I'll speak to the hospitality, but there are teachers, there are firefighters, there are police, there are a number of individuals and families that make up the infrastructure of this community. And we, as a community, need to advocate and we need to integrate options for these people to live. We do not have transportation within the city, let alone to the city. I have many employees who live in LaGrange, live in Page, live in Dale, who have to commute in to work, in large part because only 2 out of my 65 employees own their own homes. Okay, the rest of them live with their parents, they rent apartments, and even my daughter, who is renting an apartment, tells me that it's less expensive to rent an apartment in South Austin than it is here in Bastrop. So this community needs our support if we're going to continue to thrive. And there's no question, the people who have already spoken said it very eloquently, growth is coming. How we receive that growth, how we manage that growth, how we prepare for that growth is incumbent upon all of us. We will be overrun. There is a tsunami of humanity that is coming from the east side of Austin. Okay, we all know the story of Musk with all of his, and now X is coming into play. All right, we know that that growth is coming. We cannot stop that growth, but we have to be prepared. And in doing so, we hear these, I read through some of the comments that if you were going to add an additional ADA, and I don't understand all of the thinking behind moving it from 2 to 1, if you're going to have an impervious cover restriction, if you're going to have an infrastructure restriction, but I don't understand why you put that burden on the property owner. The city should have a general map that says, in this particular area, the capacity is X. And with our current number of residents, our usage is Y. And to bring that and put that demonstration on people who want to add an ADU, perhaps to be a home for one of my employees or the musicians that come to place, it creates a land rush because you certainly want to be at the beginning of that conversation and not at the end of it when the capacity has now run out. But if you ask me to go give you an explanation or a justification of what the capacity of the infrastructure is, okay, you're inviting a he said, she said conversation that is going to take many different forms. Okay, what are the standards? What are the acceptable rates? I think everybody here believes, as we do, that Bastrop needs to be preserved. There is a downtown community that we will fight tooth and nail to preserve. It has a vibe, it is welcoming. It is part of what our guests, our visitors, our new residents migrate towards. It is part of our signature of Bastrop. What happens along 71 will happen along 71. What happens on the outskirts will happen on the outskirts. But we need to find a way to integrate what we do, how we repurpose the interior of Bastrop, do it not only such that it is maintainable and sustainable, which, yes, of course it needs to be, but also is welcoming and receiving to those who make the downtown area what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Up next, we have Richard Smarzik. He wishes to speak on item 3A. Please state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Richard Smarzik. I live at 925 Main Street in this lovely downtown area. My wife and I have a shop. She's the owner, and I get to manage it for her. When it comes to parking, I absolutely believe that modifying our requirements to insist that development include first layer parking is a much needed change to our code. Imagine if a small acreage infill lot with dense housing did not provide parking for their tenants or the property owners. Where would they park? Just consider 30 to 100 vehicles parking on a public thoroughfare because the development did not include parking. What would be the impact to emergency vehicles and to other area homeowners? We do not need another citizen committee to review the proposed changes. You, our commissioners, are that citizen committee. We do not need more rodeos. It's time to get on with other priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have Shannon Day. She does not wish to speak, but she is in support of item 3B and 3C. I have Ian Riker Watts, and they do not wish to speak, but please record my support for items 3B and 3D. Okay, up next we have Terry Petit. He wishes to speak about item 3C. Terry, are you still here? Yes, Terry, I said your name wrong. Beatty. Look, I'm sorry, it's kind of, it didn't even sound right when it came out. Okay, Terry, please state your name, address, and you have 3
my
minutes.
name is Terry Beatty, and I live at 616 Rebecca here in Bastrop. And I'm here just to talk a little bit about 3C. First of all, I really do support the idea of reducing impervious ground cover. My concern is the focus on not adding additional dwelling units, and that goes back to concern about its effect on affordable housing, just like the gentleman before was talking about. I know in my own case, I have a daughter that was teaching here at the high school a couple of years ago, and she had to move out of Bastrop because she couldn't afford it, and moved into Smithville and was able to find a house that the homeowner had built a place in the back, and she is living in a garage apartment there. And it's specific. The lady only rents to firefighters and teachers and people like that. And so we have a lot of folks that work in the restaurant business, teachers, musicians, artists, and so on, that need places, affordable places to live. And I'm concerned. I'd love the idea of reducing the impervious cover, but having the focus on not adding additional dwelling units, it seems a little bit, it seems like it's going to undermine our ability to offer additional housing units. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. All right. Up next, we have Jen Lucas. She wishes to speak on item 3C. Hello? Can you please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm Jen Lucas. I live at 1709 Garfield Street here in Bastrop. Thank you all for your service on this commission. I'm here as a bit of a perplexed citizen. I just bought that house in August and love my neighborhood. And if I'm understanding correctly, some of my property rights are being proposed to be taken away as far as what can be built on the property that I just built or that I just bought. And I don't know how many public information sessions you all have had, but I hope that before we take away anyone's property rights, that we have a whole lot of public input on that. This is Texas. It's property rights. And on the affordability, to be able to have small, affordable units that's not taking up more land, and if we want people to work at the restaurants, if we want people working at the schools, just like all these folks have said, where are they going to live? And we're talking about taking away the ability to build small, affordable units. It just seems, like I said, I'm perplexed. It just seems very confusing why this is on the table. Yeah. And I also, if one of our neighbors here said that there's false information in the agenda, if that's true, that is unacceptable. And I hope that there's a very clear fact-checking process before information is put in front of the public. So I don't know if that's correct that there's false information there, but I hope there's never false information again, because we rely on our government to teach us what's going on in our government so that we can be part of that process, and we need honest information. And I'm also confused. I'm new to coming to these types of meetings, but it seems like even the process of these meetings is not clear about how many minutes we have to talk and if it's per item or if it's collective. And I mean, I work for a small nonprofit, and even we have those types of policies written down. So I hope that our procedures are also very clear. So again, thank you all for your service. Thank you for listening. And please, please don't take away our property rights without having us very much involved in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Up next, we have Tom Leibowitz. Did I get that correct? You did. All right. Do you want to speak, sir? All right. Item 3C, ADUs.
Thank you very much. So I'm Tom Leibowitz, 1909 Main Street and 1501 Hill Street. So I've reviewed the proposed changes to the B3 code development rules, and although I find the rationale behind some of them reasonable, I'm deeply concerned with a couple of the items. Specifically now I'm going to talk about item 3C, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about one that's listed and peppered throughout the document, but not specifically addressed with any proposals. So first I'm going to talk about reducing the number of ADUs from 2 to 1. So the ability to create additional structures in properties in town has unfortunately been heavily underutilized and should really be encouraged rather than increasingly restricted. Growth in the number of ADUs would both enable people to generate income from the properties that they own and enable more people to live within walking distance of downtown. More people in town means more people walking to work, schools, local shops and restaurants, and less congestion in and around town as people have to drive to and from the colony or further out. The second issue I'd like to talk about is minimum lot sizes, because there are at least 6 times in which this is referenced throughout the document. So presumably at some point, all of which are disparaging about the lack of minimum lot sizes. So I'd like to address it because presumably it's going to come up. So although not specifically proposed within the recommendations, there are several concerns expressed about potential adverse effects of lack of minimum lot sizes. For example, building units on small lots and then the owners adding additional ADUs on each and then having 10 times the density that's originally been proposed. That's not something I'm making up. That's something that is explicitly written as a concern. However, this has been in effect for several years and no such developments have taken place. That has not happened uniformly throughout the city. So putting it there as a hypothetical when we have real world observations doesn't seem to be very productive. So I would think that those things can't happen because we have other restrictions, minimum setback requirements and so on, so we don't need minimum lot size restrictions. I would really implore the P&Z to let people decide what to do with their own land. As Jen talked about with the property rights, let the market decide what size buildings people want to live on and what size lots, rather than having it dictated in the planning and zoning. So I suspect that you'll find that if you do see what the market wants, that you're going to find a pretty broad range in terms of what sorts of lot sizes and housing sizes people are going to want. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, up next we have Jody Smith. She would like to speak on item 3C. Hello, ma'am. Can you please state your name and address? You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jody Smith. I live on North Main. Thank you so much for hearing us tonight and giving us your consideration. For me, the starting point is really that people should have homes. And when I think about that, I especially think about the people who already invest so much in this town and who are tied to this town. So those are people like our teachers. They're people like the people who make all the downtown businesses work, all the small businesses work in Bastrop. You've heard from some of those business owners about the constraints that their employees face in finding housing so they can live relatively near where they work and not have to live out in the county and find a way to get into town. And there are also concerns I hear from friends about their children, their adult children who want to come home or are trying to find their own place to live in Bastrop and can't do so. And so I think there are a lot of people who are already tied to Bastrop through their work or through their family who need a place to live, whether it's through rental or home ownership, and they're not able to find it today. We need a bigger supply of diverse housing that meets people at different household sizes and different income levels. And unfortunately, the proposals in 3C would take away some of that diverse housing because it would restrict the number of ADUs that could be built, and it would potentially, as a previous speaker mentioned, impose a minimum lot size where there is not one today. Both of these would be changes to existing rules. What I suggest we do is keep the current rules. There is no need for change. There is no crisis that is happening. In terms of the housing, especially in the parts of the city where I think a lot of people are focused on with this, being the central neighborhoods of downtown, the North End, Emile, the new addition, those neighborhoods. I'd like to make a couple of, actually 3 specific, sort of more technical comments about the proposals. One is in the ADU proposal, that's section 6.3.00, that's in the code. There, in addition to changing from 2 to 1, there's this new phrase added, a new sentence. I think it is very unclear, and as a person who parses statute, looks at statute often, I can tell you it's going to be impossible to enforce. So thank goodness we're still in the workshop phase and you can take this feedback because this phrase, this additional structures may be approved if the impervious cover requirements and other infrastructure demands can be met. That's not drafted well, and so if you are going to consider something like that, that needs to be really refined in a way that gives detail and specificity about it. I also think for impervious cover that's fine to reduce to 50% in residential, and that is a more natural limit to building additional units than a sort of arbitrary number of 2 units. I had also signed up to speak on item 3D. Would you like me to do that at this time?
Sure, you can.
Okay, so my comments there are just a bit more technical in nature. One is, so about the tree list, although we have a fan of hackberries who has already spoken, I heard a sort of snickering around because there are so many people who speak disparagingly about hackberries. I think that if you put in place a rule that allows people that prohibits property owners from cutting down, 10 or 11-inch hackberries. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by that and by facing fines for cutting down hackberries. Maybe that's a public education campaign about hackberries. I don't know. But that seems like an odd one to include given at least the comments that I hear people say about hackberries. I'm not an arborist, so maybe just get a little more input from arborists about that one. The other comment is about the replanting with 4 or 3-inch caliper trees for removed trees. And this one, I had specifically been advised by an arborist recently that this is not best for the tree. Because I was talking about this kind of approach. And the arborist advised that planting more like 2 or 2.5-inch caliper trees is better for the trees getting established and having a better survival rate. Not planting bigger trees just is not as good for the tree's establishment rate or survival. So that was surprising information to me when I learned that recently, and I would encourage you to make that change to the proposed tree ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, up next I have Priscilla Ruiz. She does not want to speak, but she is in opposition of item 3C. Up next we have Luke Thompson. He wants to speak on item 3D and 3C. Please state your name and address, sir. You have.
My name's Luke Thompson. I live at 216 Wakakawa. I just gave away where I live. But at any rate, I'm opposed to 3C as it's written right now for the same reasons a lot of other folks have mentioned, so I won't spend a lot of time there. On 3D, we're heading in the right direction. There's a lot more work to be done on that, and I hope to be participating in that. But I do want to say that over the years, I've lived all over the state of Texas, and I have come to Bastrop specifically to see birds. And birds are a big economic driver for this city. We're one of the original 3 cities designated as a bird city in the state of Texas, and that alone has drawn people into this town. We're a tree island in the middle of the Central Flyway for birds all the way up to Canada. And people come here specifically to see the birds that pass through here. Trees equal birds. So I'm very much in favor of strengthening our tree ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Is this Bijo or Bijo? Matthew? B-I-J-O, is that what it is? Yes. How do I pronounce that, sir? Bijo. Bijo. Okay, can you please come up? Do you wish to speak or no? Okay. All right, he is in support of all the changes. Okay, up next is Alex Thomas. He does not wish to speak, but he is in support of all the changes. I'm sure y'all are brothers. Let me try this. I'm not even C-H-A-R, char. Okay, he does not wish to speak, but he's in support of all the changes. Is this Sine Chandy? Yes. All right. Okay. Do you wish to speak or not? You did not check it off. No, no, sir. Okay. But he is in support of all the changes. Janus Highness. Am I saying that correctly? Olayu? Yes. All right. And he does not wish to speak, but he's in support of all the changes. Abraham Joseph does not wish to speak, but is in support of all the changes. Okay. Tom Dickey does not wish to speak, but he does support item 3D. That was a new one that came up. Courtney Dyer, do you wish to speak or not? Yes? Okay. She would like to speak on item 3D. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Courtney Dyer. I live at 234 Antioch Road in Page. I am here because I am the president of the new chapter of Native Plant Society of Texas. And I wanted to talk specifically about part 3 of 3D. So the proposal to add additional species to the existing plant list. So our chapter, we actually met on Monday and we reviewed the proposed plant list, and we were in agreement with what's been removed and what's being added. However, we would like to see an addition for perennial plants and native pollinator plants added to that list, just because native plants are essential to our pollinators, and a lot of our pollinators are specialist pollinators, meaning that if the native plant goes, so does the pollinator. And so we would just really like to see native plants that are flowering added to that list, because it seems like a no-brainer, because they are more water conscious, they need less maintenance than non-native plants. We offer our further collaboration to adding to the list. We think this is a great start, but we hope that it's not finalized just yet. And I have a whole list of some pollinator plants to get us started if you want it. I could hand it off to anyone.
Do you have multiple copies? They can get us
I can
multiple
also
copies. All right.
email it
Yes.
as well. But that's all I wanted to add.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Up next, we have Patricia Rain. Do you wish to speak or not speak? You didn't select. You wish to speak? Okay. All right. You want to speak on item 3D? Come on up.
Hello, Commissioners, and thank you for inviting public comment. You have a lot of patience. My name is Patricia Rain. My address is 428 Goodyear Trace. It's in between Bastrop and Smithville. My husband and I moved from Austin almost 6 years ago, and because Bastrop has a lot of natural beauty. We love nature, and it has tremendous diversity of nature. I want to see that natural beauty of Bastrop continue as development and construction change the landscape. Today I want to speak to the proposed list of trees for new construction. I suggest that the list should contain only trees that are native to this area. Native trees use less water, way less water than introduced species, which creates less economic impact in the city. Also, native plants sequester more water during rain events, which would be very helpful if ADUs are built, right? Native trees also invite bees, birds, butterflies to the area, and Bastrop has the honor of being a state of Texas designated bird city. To keep the birds interested in Bastrop, we need to have the trees that bring them here. That's native trees that they're used to. So Professor Doug Tallamy wrote this book, and he directed his students to research the butterflies that are attracted to different trees. They found that in their area, crepe myrtle supported one species of butterfly, whereas oak trees supported up to 500 species. This type of research should guide the choice of preferred trees. I support strengthening the tree ordinance, but we also need to add some information and maybe review it. I suggest that you develop a committee of master gardeners, there's a bunch of them here, master gardeners, master naturalists, and Courtney, the Native Plant Society, representatives to propose a list of trees for developers to use. Many of the current proposed trees are not native and would use excessive water and would not support the bees, the birds, and the butterflies that we do enjoy seeing in our neighborhoods. And finally, about hackberries. I think we should add information to the proposed list for developers, because there are some people that don't like messy trees. And if you don't like messy trees, you don't want a hackberry. And there's many small notes we could make like that that would help developers choose appropriate trees for their clients. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, up next we have Brent Hewitt. He wishes to speak on section 3D, agenda item 3D. Brent, are you still here? All right. Well, I don't know. He didn't select if he was for it or against it. He just wanted to speak on it. All right. Patricia Todd, she would like to speak on item 3C. Good evening. So you state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Thank you.
I am Patricia Todd. I live at 608 Pecan. I've lived in Bastrop almost 6 years. I'm a master gardener with the Bastrop chapter. I'm a Lost Pines master naturalist, and I've been a member of Native Plant Society for a while, and recently joined the Bastrop chapter of Native Plant Society. I specifically want to speak to 3D. I'm definitely for reducing the caliper for protected trees and doing a tree inventory. I'm also for changing the list of plants that can be recommended to developers. However, I think the proposal needs a little more work. It's got a non-native invasive on it and mimosa. And I want to say I'm a big proponent, staunch fan of hackberry. And that's it.
All right, thank you. All right. We have Laura Munoz. Munoz? Yes. Sorry, it didn't have it threw me off. All right, Munoz. She does not wish to speak, but she is, you do now? Yeah, I do now. Okay, I guess we'll let you change it. See, I'm nice. No, I'm just...
Thank you. Hi, my name's Laura Munoz. I live in Red Rock, but I work at 702 Chestnut. I'm the new broker owner at George Reineman Real Estate. And I came to you this evening to express support for private property owners in our wonderful city. As a real estate broker, a property manager, a mother, and a daughter, I have seen firsthand the lack of affordable housing in our community and appreciate the Commission's willingness to address the issue head-on. However, I have serious concerns about the proposed changes to our city's ordinance relating to the number of ADUs a property owner may have. Bastrop is at a critical junction as it faces the dual challenge of accommodating growth while preserving affordability. Like many rapidly growing areas near major cities, we are confronted with significant housing affordability challenges. Housing affordability is a complicated problem, and there is no silver bullet. As the city becomes more attractive to new residents, its leaders and community members must navigate these issues through a combination of less restrictive zoning policies, infrastructure investments, and housing affordability initiatives to prevent displacement and ensure diverse housing on all options. Was that 3 already? Oh.
No, you have more time.
Okay. Allowing 2 ADUs per lot expands the potential for more affordable rental units. ADUs often serve as more accessible and affordable housings for moderate income people, such as teachers, musicians, first responders, employees at Neighbors, and other essential workers. By reducing the number of ADUs, the amendment would limit options for those who can't afford traditional housing. Many areas in Texas are already increasing flexibility for property owners to encourage ADU construction to combat housing shortages. Reducing the number of ADUs in Bastrop is a step backwards when other cities are loosening restrictions to increase housing stock, thereby addressing affordability issues. Having 2 ADUs allows families to create flexible, multi-generational living arrangements. In some cases, this may mean having aging parents, like my 91-year-old mother, and young adults, like my 31-year-old son, who comes home between contract jobs, this allowing them to live close by while maintaining their independence. Limiting ADUs to just 1 restricts these options and reduces the social and familial benefits of multi-generational living. In closing, I want to ask that the Planning and Zoning Commission to table this item for further discussion. Furthermore, I want to reemphasize my desire as a concerned member of the community, a staunch defender of private property rights and industry professional, to work with you on this issue, and I know that you all will approach this matter with thoughtfulness and respect for all stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we need to take a break? Is everyone good? Okay. Huh? Do we have any water? Do we have any water available? Okay. All right. We're almost through with the citizen comments, y'all. All right. Next up, we have Matthew Aguilar, and he does not wish to speak, but he's in opposition of item 3C. And I have a few emails here. Okay. Which one? Oh, that's on the one I was writing on. Okay, I'll just, Gail Minto. Let's see. She is in favor. Oh, thank you. She doesn't say the agenda item. She does not have the, let's see. Agenda is supposed to It looks like she's just in support of all the agenda items. Jimmy, since you emailed, do you want us to add anything? Is he still here? I thought nope, he went outside. He left. Okay. So Jimmy spoke in his support of the items. Lindy Larson, she emailed in agenda item number 2. Let's see. I want to think. She's in support of the agenda items. We have Mel Cooper, who is in support of citizen items 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, and E. And we have something from James Beck. I'll read what he has here. Good evening, my name is James Beck, and I'm a resident of Bastrop. And I've come to you this evening to express support for private property owners in our wonderful city. As a real estate broker, I have seen firsthand the lack of affordable housing in our community and appreciate the Commission's willingness to address the issue head on. However, I have serious concerns about the proposed changes to our city's ordinances relating to the number of accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, a property owner may have. Bastrop is at a critical juncture as it faces a dual challenge of accommodating growth while preserving affordability. Like many rapidly growing areas near major cities, we are confronted with the significant housing affordability challenges. Housing affordability is a complicated problem, and there is no silver bullet. As the city becomes more attractive to new residents, its leaders and community members must navigate these issues through a combination of less restrictive zoning policies, infrastructure investments, and housing affordability initiatives to prevent displacement and ensure diverse housing options for all residents. And that is all that I have for citizen comments. Do we need to take a break, or we're good? We can keep moving. Good. All right. So thank you, everyone, for your citizen comments. They're great. Lots of input was put out there for us to take in, so we will definitely do that. So on to item 3, our workshop. Ms. Sylvia.
Well, I'm glad we had a lot of citizens' comments. There are developers in the audience who I thought for sure were going to scream about the impervious cover ratio. So, surprise, surprise. Tonight we're going to be talking about really what is the central issue that's driving a lot of these changes. And that is flooding, and that's water quality. And here's the relationship to all of that. The on-site parking gives an opportunity for some of the grasses in the area to clean the water before it gets to the street, before it gets to our rivers and streams. Density, reducing the density, is also less runoff, less congestion, less street runoff. Additional dwelling units, also less runoff. And then trees and native vegetation also assisting in water quality. So as we talk through all of these things, most of the central theme is that of flooding. And in your packet was a pretty big bill that the City Council has been presented with. So let's talk about this parking in the first layer. We had a resident stand up and say, that's not true, that's not what the code says. These proposals seek to add flexibility and allow residents to park in the first layer. The Planning Commission amended the code not too long ago that said you're a non-conforming use, and if you drop a pin and within 200 feet everybody's parking in the front, then you can also park in the front. That's sort of an extra hoop to jump through. If there's parking allowed in the first layer, that gives residents the option. It also gives the development community the option. I want to be very clear that the only time current residents have to change their parking is if they are beyond a 50% remodel. We visited all of that. If the resident doesn't want to do it, can't afford to do it, there's an administrative variance that this Planning Commission approved, and we do it at the staff level. So these are the 3 proposals. It's removing an alley entrance as the preferred means. It is removing parking maximums. That is, if I'm building a home or I want my home to have 4 parking spaces because I have 2 teenage children and I have 2 adults in the home and we all drive, I should be able to park 4 cars on site. I can't do that today. It is a proposal to amend in the technical manual parking in the first layer. So here's what the current code says, and here's to the honesty point. This is what the code says. This is Chapter 6, Private Realm Development Standards, page 97. Residential garage front facades must begin in the 3rd layer. And so the 3rd layer, the first layer is that which is at the front facade of the home, everything forward. The 2nd layer is 20 feet beyond the front facade. And the 3rd layer is everything behind that. The code is silent about parking in the front layer, so we've been scratching our head on, is that a code enforcement issue? What is that? Who do we enforce and how do we enforce that? And the truth is we're not enforcing it. So if I'm not enforcing it, then why have it in the code? That's a pretty simple. Here's also the code. On all surfaces located in the 2nd layer or the 3rd layer, the lot as defined by place type standards. And this is again talking about residential, again in Chapter 6 of the code. I didn't make these things up. This is how it's written. Honest Abe. So let's go to 6.3.05. Alley entrances are the preferred method of entry. Again, we let folks decide where they want to park. What we are seeing today, and I'm not sure why so this was a previous condition. This is taken exactly from the 2017 code. These are large lots, you have large sidewalks, you have large areas for impervious cover, or pervious cover. I do understand the let's not have lot size minimums, but everything has a balance. There's a plus and a minus to everything that we do. And to believe that any development rule stands in isolation is a complete misunderstanding of development from start to finish. I make a joke that planners never execute. They plan at the 50,000 foot level. For a planner to really understand what the work is that they're doing, they really should go and talk to the street superintendent, get on a piece of equipment, go clear a drainage ditch, go understand how the equipment works, for us to understand how the city pieces together. So, these are current examples of today. If this house at 1406 Main Street was destroyed by more than 50%, assuming they didn't want to go through the non-conforming, these types of things would not be allowed. This is 1406 Main and 1307 Jefferson. Again, these are existing conditions. We make them go through a quote-unquote variance process right now. Why make them do that? This is a substantial lot. They have the opportunity to park, and there is enough impervious cover and pervious surface in this area that this parking should be allowed without having our residents jump through an extra hoop. This is Riverside Grove. This is, again, parking in the front. And what is unique about Riverside Grove is this is what folks may say is old planning and isn't walkable and isn't friendly and is inefficient. These trees are in what is called the private realm. This is the property owner's responsibility to maintain those trees. The sidewalk is the city's responsibility, and the right-of-way is the city's responsibility. Under the new code, as you saw in Blakey, as Jimmy Crouch mentioned, those trees are moved into the public realm. Those trees are moved into the streetscape. And so guess whose responsibility is now to maintain that tree being alive and watered? My street guy, my BP&L guy, and this gal right here, and the parks guys. Again, another angle of what some consider just inefficient planning. This is at a 5 o'clock and beyond hour where there are a lot of cars on the street still, but there is ample room for emergency vehicles to get through this street. So here are the arguments I have had, and I will tell you my email box has been full. Cars are going away in the future, and we need to plan for that. The B3 code says that in its preamble. Asphalt creates heat zones. It does. We are experimenting with other asphalt types that won't be so hot. Streets are expensive to maintain. Yes, they are. But you know what's even more expensive? An ambulance or a fire truck that gets damaged when it can't make it, or a lawsuit that happens because our first responders didn't make it. It's more costly for the city. Yes, it is. And we need mass transit, so go ahead and plan for it now. True, perhaps at some point in the future we may have mass transit in Bastrop. That is not the case today. So, options for Planning Commission to consider. You can amend the code to allow parking in the first layer by right, even if a structure is damaged more than 50%. So they don't have to go through this variance exemption. You can amend the code to give the homeowner the option to park on any layer in the lot, whether it's the first, second, or third, however the homeowner chooses. Or you can leave the code as is. Any questions?
Doesn't look like we have any so far. Jordan, you got one?
Do we need to make a motion then?
No, we're not.
Nope.
We're just workshopping.
It's just workshopping.
Just making sure.
Okay. We're going to circle back, I think, at some point. All right. This one has drawn a lot of ire from people. Proposal to amend 63006 to create on-site parking requirements. Right now, the code has no parking minimums. So, this is a quote directly from the B3 code. The intent of building a walkable, bikeable, and an easily navigable city means all modes of transportation are available to reduce the reliance on the car. Parking requirements in the P3 will be market-driven. Lot coverage shall not exceed the place type standards. And what that means is you're bound by the impervious cover rule anyway. The standards in the code support the notion through limited and eliminating parking. This is a local connector street that's in the code. This is what was shown at the code rodeos. That's a pretty picture. I would raise my hand to want that picture. How many of you would raise your hand to want that picture? That's the reality of that picture. Here is a reduced front yard. Here is the trees in the public realm. Here's the parking aisle. Here's the drive lane, parking aisle, sidewalk, trees in the front yard. Reduced front yard setback, sidewalk, tree in the public realm, parking aisle, drive aisle, parking aisle, tree, sidewalk, facade. That's a toughie. So, prior parking allowances. We go back to off-street parking. This was the picture on the right is a picture of what was previously allowed. That is what I would consider a decent combination of the B3 and the 2017 code. That is a meet the baby in the middle, so to speak, diagram. That is a wider parking lane. That's no parking in the front. That's the sidewalk. It does move the trees back to the private realm. It does move the trees back to where the property owner is responsible for those trees. But this is a good absolute meet in the middle. It has wider sidewalks that'll encourage hiking, biking, and walking. And it still moves the front facade over. So that's a decent picture. Those are wider streets, though. Those are much wider streets than are shown in our diagrams. So here's an argument. Parking on site is bad. There's less opportunity to build. It's not fiscally responsible because the greater density means more taxable value to the city. Adding a required driveway will increase impervious cover anyway. Streets are expensive to maintain. Wider streets equal untreated bad runoff into the river and streams affecting water quality. So, options for the Planning Commission to consider. We can create on-site parking requirements that allow mixed media, such as crushed granite, partial driveways, or some other permeable surface. We can amend the code to a prior iteration that requires a minimum of 2 parking spaces per lot. We can amend the code to prior iterations and review street standard widths, meaning move the streets wider so that we do have accessible traffic for our emergency responders. We can leave the code as is and require wider streets, or we can leave the code as is, period. Any questions?
No one has any questions? No, we gotta have something.
Do you have a recommendation on a decision out of those options?
So for the commission, I would say if we're going to, if we have a development that's going to come in that's going to require alley entrances, that wants to require alley entrances, then those front streets need to be wider to give the opportunity for cars that are going to inevitably park in front of people's homes as visitors so that we don't congest the streets and still allow opportunity for our first responders. And I'll show that in some later pictures.
Okay, so right now the concern is that the streets aren't wide enough
Correct.
in the given code.
Correct.
Sylvia, do we have these anywhere in this packet?
No.
Can we get a copy of these?
Sure. This is the toughy one, because this goes to the heart of most of what we're talking about, and it's going to talk about density, and it's going to talk about a little bit of the additional dwelling units, and it's going to talk about a lot of the other in terms of streets. So the proposal is to reduce by 10%. Our P5, reducing it by 15%. This is why I thought the rotten tomatoes by the development community would be thrown, because 65% is a pretty drastic reduction in the commercial segment. So there is a Advancing Earth and Space Sciences. There's a geophysical research letter that took 50 years of data. And it said annual floods increased by 3.3% on average for each 1 percentage point increase in the impervious cover basin. So we had a code, we had some floods, we had a moratorium, we took the opportunity to build a new code. We took the opportunity to build a new code to say we were going to address drainage and flooding risks. But in that code, we reduced lot size minimums, completely gone, and we increased impervious cover. I'll let you decide what happened. So, there's a lot of research that talks about how much impervious cover affects flooding. Bunch of other research on runoff coefficients. So if we allow pervious pavers, nothing is going to be completely permeable. But the runoff coefficients for permeable things that decrease the runoff altogether and allow it to percolate down into the ground, which allow it to clean itself before it actually hits the rivers and streams, is a good idea. So the City Council was presented with this project scoring matrix, and this was presented in late 2023. These are drainage improvements that are required throughout the city. This is over $120 million of drainage improvements. When the consultant was asked, if we spend $120 million, how many homes will it save? The response was, we're not sure. And we're not sure that it would even save one. Obviously, we put the pause. What really we should be doing is a regional drainage approach. We really should be addressing drainage from a larger holistic level, as opposed to forcing development to have an equal coefficient of before and after. And I'm going to show you a proposed development here shortly. The way the code is written today, you have to, pre and post development must equal. That means if your development was releasing 4 square feet of water, then whatever you build must also only release 4 square foot of water. What that means is you're required to build on-site detention. So previous conditions, larger lot sizes, a lot more green space. Water has a place to go. Somebody mentioned our infrastructure in some of those infill parts of town cannot sustain increased densities. It can sustain it with some pretty serious investment. And you will see Pecan Street, Hill Street, Pecan Beach, these are sort of at the heart of where we're talking about. That is a $50 million plus investment in what is town proper. So that strikes the question of affordability. There's a drainage impact fee that we're either going to pass one of two ways. We're going to pass it to the residents in the form of a utility bill rate increase based on the amount of impervious cover they have on their lot. That is a tried and true method. We're going to pass it on to the developers for what they create. That is an obvious method. They're creating the new, they should address the new. But we get to a multiplying effect when we continue to add into areas that are not able to take it. Because at some point, I've got to borrow this money to pay for those improvements. Without a drainage fund, that's a general fund impact. I've got to make the decision, do I spend $50 million in drainage improvements in this one particular area? Do I spend it at the Gills Branch flood mitigation for $14 million? What combination of this can I do, and how fast can I pay it? Considering what we take in revenue from ad valorem property taxes, it would take me more than 20 years to get even just 20% of this done. So when we talk about ADUs and we talk about those things that we'll talk about in a little while, there is a multiplying effect. Some would say, well, the city's behind, you should have planned for it. I don't disagree, and I can't disagree. But I also geographically can't change the location of where the city sits on the Gills Branch and near the Colorado River. Water will find its own level. We didn't do regional detention, and so water is always trying to make its way back. We go back to this picture. Again, larger green spaces. Our previous regulations accounted for 50% of impervious cover, and the proposal in front of you today is to reduce it back to 50%, reduce it from the current 60%. This is what a lot looked like before. A 7,000 square foot lot, which was in the prior regulations, 50% impervious cover meant 35% or 3,500 square feet of that lot could be covered with concrete. That means 3,500 square feet required to be open space as impervious. That meant a 20-foot setback in the back, 5 foot at the sides, and that's building code. You need fire separation, and 20 feet at the front. That gave you 3,170 square feet of pervious space. Add a driveway at a 12 by 22 stall, 2 of them, so that your truck isn't overhanging onto the sidewalk, affecting the walkers who want to get by. And you understand why houses begin to have articulation to them, because they're creating green space among just the one block. That doesn't even include the sidewalk. So it is a mathematical problem how developers just try to reach these numbers. Existing conditions with no minimum lot size. I took 4,500 because that is what is the average of the new homes that are coming up. And that's a 45 by 100 square foot house. And that is 60% impervious cover under the existing condition. That means 2,700 square feet of that 4,500 square foot lot can be covered in concrete or some other impervious surface. So that means 1,800 of pervious is needed, green space. So you begin to understand with these numbers why the developers are shrinking the backyards and shrinking the front yards. 12.5 in the back times 45 of the lot width is 582.50. 5 foot on each side and a 10-foot setback, which is recommended in our code, gives you 1,762.5 of pervious space. Since we don't have parking maximums, or we don't have on-site parking, there's no need to perform a driveway. That's a lot of concrete on a much smaller lot. This is what's being built. So here's that graphic of the prior, and you see these graphics around the area. These lots that were once larger have begun to be cut up. This is Bastrop Grove, which is a bit of a hybrid. The developer sued, and we are working under what is called a consent decree. He got to cherry pick what was good in the old code and what he wanted to do in the new code. If you've been by the Grove, we don't want to see that stuff happen without appropriate planning for drainage. This is the current code that shows the house close to the front. It shows the garage. This particular diagram shows an additional dwelling unit at the rear. This is Addleton. This is the new subdivision going up off of 20. This is a 35-foot lot product. Parking only on one side of the street.
Question,
Yes.
This is B3 code compliant.
This is this is out in the county. This is not quote-unquote specific B3 compliant, but this is as close to B3 as, this is the same developer who developed Plum Creek and Kyle. Mhm. This is Bastrop Grove, this hybrid I was talking about. These houses that you see here on the driveway don't have a garage, and so they have a parking pad. So here is a proposal that sits in front of us. This is an approved site plan on 4.25 acres. It's 44 plus or minus units. It's trying to meet the pre and post development must equal. That means on-site detention equals slow release, which means none to minimal impact. So there's a detention pond that's required. The long-term maintenance of the detention pond across the city, not just this particular development, is going to be borne by who? We know developers build and walk away. Perhaps not this developer, but that's been the general case around the city. And unfortunately, flooding doesn't stop at the city limit line, it continues. And we see what's happening with Hunter's Crossing to the south. This is the approved preliminary drainage plan. Area is pretty blue. Pecan Street is higher, Linden Street is higher, and Hill Street is higher. It is not in a mapped FEMA flood area. However, it's shown in the city's draft drainage master plan to a tune of needing $23 million in that area. The city has a pond to this side that it was only designed to the 35-year flood event. So when we have a major flood event, there is some overtopping of that pond. Our current rules say you can't exacerbate the drainage. This isn't exacerbating. This is actually what's there and what's going to happen. So this is an allowed development in that area. But not being in a mapped FEMA flood area, when we talk about affordability, we're sometimes putting our most vulnerable at risk to be in areas that are going to be prone to flooding. This type of development isn't new. This is the city of Rockport. This is a development that is in between Rockport and Holiday Beach. This is very much a B3 type development with the short front yard, small parking pad, if any, in some of these units. And that is what that density overall looks like. That's on the coast. The soil's a little bit different, right? Sand is more absorbent than clay, but rest assured there are flooding issues in this area. So the arguments that I've heard, and I've heard a lot of arguments, the city is growing, we need all of the housing we can get. Rooftops breed retail, don't you want a Target? We have too many people here as it is. There's already too much traffic. The schools are at a breaking point. There's not enough teachers. And you heard it tonight, more housing equals more affordable housing. Teachers, musicians, et cetera, need housing. And we need affordable housing, so density is the way to achieve it. So, options for the commission to consider. Reduce the ADU allowance to 1 unless the appropriate infrastructure is in place. And that means in some of the areas of town where there are larger lots, if the 50% impervious cover rule can be met, Katie, bar the door, you can put 2 there. Potentially 3 if the commission decides it. Because I'm not taxing existing infrastructure. You can maintain it on your lot, and I'm not pushing that problem downstream. We can also be creative, and we can create additional credits for impervious cover via on-site holding tanks or best management practices to treat roof runoff. We don't have any of those kinds of credits in our code. Nothing. I would love to be able to have the ability to capture water and reuse it. Not only is it the smart thing to do, it's the less taxing thing to do on our existing water supply. 1,000 gallons for every inch of rainfall that falls on a 2,000 square foot roof is how much water we could save. The average residential home is 3 point, yes, sir.
Yes, question here. Microphone. Commissioner Moss, can you hit the mic, please?
Yeah. So, I guess the issue, you say you're not taxing it?
No, not taxing the infrastructure,
Okay, but is.
overwhelming the infrastructure.
Okay, but are we going to talk about the impact fees on that for ADUs?
We have not, no, that's in your impact fee committee at your next meeting.
Okay.
Or we can leave the code as is.
Commissioner Scott.
So if I understand this correctly, the driving force behind wanting to reduce the lot coverage and then create a minimum lot size is drainage.
Correct.
Is that also the reason why you're suggesting that we should reduce the amount, or essentially reduce the living units for a lot in the city to 1 instead of 2?
Correct, unless the infrastructure can be met, i.e., if we have a homeowner who has, and isn't bound by HOA rules, because that's a different story. If we have a homeowner who has, let's say, a 5,000 square foot lot, but they don't have a garage, they don't even have a carport, and they park out in the open, some of what you see out here, and they've got available impervious cover because they have a smaller home on the lot, and let's say their impervious cover number is only 30%, and they have enough impervious cover amount to add an additional ADU besides what's already there, great. That would be an administrative approval by staff.
Okay, so as far as ADUs are concerned, there's no other concern as far as the demand on our city utilities like water or electric?
So there's always the demand for water and what we can actually serve. Today, we have additional wells coming online, so I'm not super concerned. The plan is for our new wastewater treatment plant that we begin to treat that effluent and put that back into the water supply. So to answer the question short, no for water, yes for wastewater, and yes for drainage.
Okay, so just because I'm a big advocate for personal property rights or private property rights as well. Instead of just saying reduce from 2 to 1, can we say you're allowed to build ADUs and just create that exception in there if you meet these requirements? Because I feel like it's a lot harder to go through the red tape, to go through the planning and zoning meetings and all this other BS, instead of, hey, let's just go ahead and put those requirements and those suggestions in there as requirements to build an ADU on your property, just so people can go ahead and not have to wait a month to get to the planning and zonings, then potentially city council and yada yada.
No, so what's written or what's proposed is that it be an administrative review. It not be a planning and zoning action or anything like that.
Okay, so they're still going to be able to build the ADUs if they meet the administrative review requirements?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's just a little confusing because we had a lot of people come up here and talk about that when you say reduce from 2 to 1, because then now you're saying, well, we don't want them at all, which I believe that. I mean, I've seen a lot of ADUs built in town. I know a couple people that have them, and they work fine, and they use them as rentals, and people enjoy them. Like I've door knocked them when we're doing a bunch of different stuff. So
Yeah, the table has red text, which I think Jody mentioned needs to be clarified, or that wasn't clear enough. But the table mentions if the appropriate infrastructure is in place, which also means the impervious cover ratios can be met, then it's an allowed through an administrative.
So ADUs can be built if they meet the impervious cover ratios that you're suggesting.
And water wastewater demand.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you say that with the current ADUs, I'm sure you're aware of them, would you say that the current ADUs that are being built in town fit those impervious cover ratios? For example, an average lot in downtown, I know a few of them that have ADUs. Would they be in non-compliance then?
We dropped a pin at Buttonwood in Maine and did a half-mile radius, and most of those lots, the average lot size was half an acre. So those are large lots where I would say an ADU is probably in compliance. I don't know how many have been actually permitted.
And then what would be your suggested minimum lot size then?
I didn't suggest a minimum lot size, I just suggested an impervious cover ratio.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to build, you know, a 1,500 square foot lot, which is 15 or 20 by, you know, whatever that amount is, and they want to build a tiny home, so long as they can meet the impervious cover ratios.
Yeah, and so we're not technically reducing 2 to 1, then we're just adding requirements if they want to build an ADU, as long as they meet the.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Elmore, you got a question?
Quick question. Earlier on in your presentation, you listed various storms that hit in the last 20, 25 years. If one of those hit today, what kind of shape are we in?
A storm event, we're going to be in tough shape. And honestly, one of the conversations with the council about this particular table was, you know, is it going to be a known fact that the city's going to flood every 15 years? And do we live with that, or do we begin to raise the tax and raise the impact fees to account for some of these improvements that are needed? And nobody has the stomach for additional tax or even additional, you know, fees on the utility bill to residents. And so, you know, some of this is a lack of deferred maintenance that we hadn't been doing that we're doing now. And the city's also been in the process of purchasing lots that are in the floodplain that developers are super hungry for because, you know, attorneys and engineers, no offense, city attorney, will all have a different response. And an engineer will tell you they can engineer it. They can engineer anything, which, you know, may be true. But in the storm event itself, whether it works or not, I don't know. And so Farm Street Village is a perfect example. Once the maps changed and Atlas 14 came into play, that entire area was blue. And it had a previously approved preliminary plat for 75 units, 75 affordable units. And again, that's placed in some of our most vulnerable in areas where if that was a HUD product, HUD wouldn't allow you to put people near railroad tracks or flood basins or anything like that. So that development didn't happen. We couldn't get past the drainage, and the city has purchased that land. And we will be using it for flood mitigation.
Can I ask a question?
Commissioner Parsons.
I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I understand everything you're saying. But as commissioners, I think that we need to be thinking as far out as we can possibly wrap our brains around in terms of what do we want the city to look like in the future for our children, for our grandchildren? What's going to make this the most sustainable, environmentally sustainable place to live? Does it make sense for us to take a pause and do some kind of regional drainage plan first before we start trying to make all these changes, and that we're just basically guessing that, you know, let's change the impervious cover to this, let's do that, based on what we think might happen if we don't have enough information? Not that I want to meet any more times a month than we already do, but does it make sense for us to hit a pause on this?
No.
Why?
You're staring at $122 million of drainage improvements that are needed. And I've given you a 50-year study that shows every 1% decrease in impervious cover decreases flood risk by 3.3%.
I understand that, Sylvia. I'm not disputing the fact that we probably need to change impervious cover. My question is, you said we don't have a regional plan.
We do not. That would require the county, multiple counties actually, to look at drainage from a complete basin level.
Okay. Why don't we explore that?
The county is, or maybe has just completed their drainage studies as well. They may be going through it or nearing completion through it, using also Half and Associates, who we used. So there's data to compare, but flooding doesn't stop at the city limit line. And I only have the power to exact basins.
I've asked my question, so thank you.
So just from what you see, as far as what we have in our requirements right now, they're just too high, and they're not sustainable as far as drainage in the future.
No.
I think that's what she means. She's saying what she sees is, yeah. So I would say the highest allowed impervious cover right now would be our commercial developments at 80%.
Correct.
what do we reduce them to? What are you?
65%.
65? Oh, yeah, okay.
That work for you?
So, and again, this doesn't mean that you have, what I'm going to say, less buildable area. This is a combination of things happening. This is, I'm going to build a detention pond. I'm going to have some tanks that handle water to decrease the runoff. There's a variety of things that can be done to receive credit to get to this number. Ignoring it and leaving it as it is not an option.
I think what I was trying to say is, why don't we do both? Why don't we look at making changes? I mean, everybody thinks on this commission thinks there are changes that need to be made. Let's progress with that. But at the same time, why don't we start thinking about doing some kind of major plan where when we do move forward, you know what the hell we're planning around in terms of potential flooding, in terms of potential drainage issues, so that we, you know, that it's a plan. It's something we can actually look at and say, okay, we don't want to do that over here because of this. And if we already have most of the data, then maybe we could already start on this potential plan or study. I don't know. I'm not saying we don't do both, Sylvia. I'm not saying we postpone. I'm just saying I think if we don't have a plan, I think it's a good idea for us to get one.
I think it's an excellent idea. Would you like to join me at Commissioner's Court? It is an excellent idea, and it absolutely needs to be done. The argument that I hear from property owners, and I'm sure you're going to hear tonight, is building a detention pond on property is a inefficient use of that land. It's an expensive pond, not just from the build of the pond, but the land that you're wasting to build the pond on, that a structure or a home or et cetera, could have been built on. You're going to hear that from the you heard that from the Pearl River development. You know, I could have built this, except the B3 cost me X amount of money. Well, the reality of it is it wasn't the B3. It is the drainage system that is there that we have to deal with. And Texas law says you can't flood your neighbor. So, you know, in as much as you have to deal with it on site, and without me having a master drainage ditch or a drainage channel that everybody pays impact fees to, then that is the only way today that folks are managing their on-site drainage is exactly that, it's on-site. The problem for the city becomes is when we have to step in and maintain it because something isn't happening correctly. And that's the case in Pecan Park. That's the case in some of the other areas in town where we're having to step in because what the developer drew and was approved isn't working.
Go ahead, Commissioner Barrow.
I have a few questions. Number one, are the recommendations that are part of this workshop just to address the infrastructure issues or to address the infrastructure issues so they don't exasperate themselves?
Yes.
Okay. Where is the city in addressing our current issues with existing centralized neighborhoods?
We are nowhere.
Nowhere. So are we concentrating on future development only?
So reducing the impervious cover is across the board. That's just one step. And our current is it's actually a buyout of some of those properties who continue to flood, and then the properties that are already in floodplain or floodway especially try to acquire those properties so that we don't continue to just build more that just causes downstream flooding. And then the third leg to that is maintenance.
Of course. So where is the city in addressing our current concerns, money-wise?
Oh, gosh. Haven't today, because it would mean a drainage impact fee or it would mean an increase in the tax.
Okay. Are there any other creative options outside of increasing a tax that other cities
grants, federal grants, and the federal government just released a large infrastructure grant program, loan program that we're going to explore. It's also important to note that we have very few of our existing engineers on staff any longer. We went through an IDIQ process, and we have new folks with a new set of eyes who have creative options on how we can fund things without it completely being on our nickel.
I think one of the main concerns that the private property owners may have, I speculate, is that, they want to be able to diversify their income streams. And ADUs are one example of that. If we had an addition of ADUs in downtown Bastrop or adjacent neighborhoods, would this tax our current infrastructure beyond what it can currently handle?
If we have no review of ADUs whatsoever, and I'm not going to say ADUs, if we have no review of structures, period, if we have no review of structures on how much impervious cover it is increasing, then yes, we're exacerbating a problem. But I can give you an example of a creative solution a property owner could have. If there is a, because we don't have the requirements for a garage in the code. And so if you went to open parking and you used what would have been the garage runoff to be the ADU in the back, that's a solution. You don't have to necessarily have a carport or a garage on your lot. The ones right here park in the front of their house with no garage, of course, parking is not allowed in the front layer right now, but that's a different story, here at the rear. So, I mean, or if the property owner was willing to put a tank to handle the water and could increase the impervious cover where they show, well, this amount of water is not flowing into the system. I mean, there's ways to work through it, but, a Katie bar the door approach that it's my property right is really not a sensible solution, because that right has to be spread among the other 14,000 residents of the town.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else have anything? All right.
So you're suggesting 50%. Is there any negotiation room to, what are we at currently? What's the reduction on that 50%?
We're at 60% currently.
60, okay. Okay, on the P3. Is there any wiggle room at all in special cases or anything? Or is it gonna be a
Again,
solid
if a property owner wants to say, hey, I'm going to rainwater harvest and I'm going to capture, and that's going to take away, 2,000 square, whatever. I mean, there's ways through it that I would hope that the staff would be able to work through with the property owner on how to do that. I mean, the commission's free to recommend a higher percentage. This is what existing infrastructure was built on, though. This is what is in the ground today. And I've had the argument at state and national conferences. I've had people, yell at me and say, you can't make me have more land than I want. Well, no, I can't, but the drainage or the infrastructure is built on a certain lot standard. And so to say that your rights are above anybody else's in the form of taxation and or property right is also not a reasonable argument. All right, let's skip to the next one. I don't feel the tomatoes yet, so. Yes, and so here is the table that we're talking about, and this is the additional dwelling units may be increased if the applicant can meet all infrastructure requirements. So, we struck 2 and put 1, and 1 being allowed by right, period. But if there's space on the lot, and again, you're willing to be creative, then perhaps it's more than 1, perhaps it's 2, perhaps it's 3. It just depends on what can be sustained with the existing infrastructure. You've heard all of these arguments already. This was a doozy. Doesn't the city want more hot taxes? Don't Airbnbs pay into the hot fund? I've had some doozies. What if I have 2 sets of parents who need to live with me, and this just doesn't seem fair, and you're taking away my property rights? And so you've heard all of that tonight. I heard it all week also, all weekend. And so, yes, it can invite investors for Airbnbs, which removes valuable housing stock from rental inventory. Conversely, it can serve as rental inventory, and it can serve as additional income to the property owner. So here's the application to Development Review Committee for review and an administrative variance. It doesn't have to come anywhere but to staff if we can show that the math works. Or you leave the code as is and allow 2 by right. Okay. Tree protections. I'm going to let the two planners who handle this, well, actually, I'm going to skip to community enrichment, and then you guys can circle back to tree protection. Because this one seems to be a pretty easy one, and we're going to talk about trees. So in Corpus Christi, I helped create a community enrichment fund. It was also recently renamed Park Development Fee, which is probably the more legal way to do it, as the city attorney's, frantically shaking her head up and down. And it would create an ordinance called Community Enrichment or a Park Development Fund that would create a fee paid for by developers who would contribute to a pot that helps improve our parks, our trails, and art in the parks. I'm proposing $250 a unit. And so for the 1,700 unit subdivision that's being built off of 969, that would have been a $425,000 fee they would have paid into that fund. Now, the arguments I get from the other side, who I thought really was going to throw tomatoes, is you're adding costs to affordable housing. Damn you, one more fee I have to pay. I already built a park in my development. Why do I have to improve somebody else's? Well, and my response to that is you have an effect on the quality of life. And so some options that the commission can consider is leave the code as is, or implement a fee to be paid either at the plat or at the building permit. And my suggestion is it be paid at the plat, at the time of plat, because sometimes subdivisions are built in phases, and then that phase may not get here right of way. So, and we have a park master plan that we're trying to build out. So I will skip back to tree protections.
I actually had a question.
Oh, yes.
I did see where y'all mentioned about developers contributing land for public parks and whatnot. How is that going to be implemented or valued towards this enrichment fund?
It is not. It is a separate fund. So right now, our developers have a fee, or they have a fee in lieu of land. So if they're trying to donate a piece of land, or the city's exacting a piece of land, a lot of times they were giving us what they're calling linear parks, this little green space among the street, or they're giving me a floodway or a flood basin, which the park master plan said you need to change that. Don't accept, trashed land for that. Then I have the ability to say, we don't want that land. That land is a market value of X. That's what I need you to contribute. Right now, the ordinance is not completely written out. There is a did I get it right? There's a fee and not the ordinance, or there's an ordinance and not the fee? There's a fee and not the ordinance. So this is in addition to.
Okay, yeah, so it's totally separate.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Item 3D. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioner. So 3D is all about tree protection. Currently, the B3 code has some places where it can use some strengthening for tree protection. The first proposal is to amend section 6.3.004 on the protected and heritage trees to decrease the caliper of inch that we start protection at. Currently in the code, we start protection for a protected tree at 13 caliper inches. Texas Local Government Code, Section 212, Chapter 212, Section 905, allows us to start mitigation at 10 inches. So these are some of the arguments that we hear. It's you're taking away the property rights to cut down the trees. That just doesn't seem fair, and 10 inches is too small. So your options to consider with this one is to leave the code as is and start protection at 13 inches, or to amend to match the Texas Local Government Code to start at 10 inches. The benefit of that is it increases the protection for trees. So we know we are able to start protection at a smaller tree, about 3 inches smaller, which just promotes more trees in town. Yes.
Who did the city consult with to come up with all of this information in these recommendations?
There was a group of, I think, 2 or 3 arborists recommended by our parks director.
Did you guys approach the USDA office here or the NRCS office here by chance?
This is still going to be vetted at the Park Development Board at their very next meeting, which I think is the 7th.
Any other questions on this one? All right, so the next proposal is the same section, but it's to add the requirements of a tree survey, add penalties, and it's a further explanation of the requirements for tree protection. All that you see on screen in red is not in the code currently. It is proposed to be added. Currently, there are no specifications around what we require in the tree survey, except for that everything above 6 inches has to be included. This amendment, would require, amongst other things, that the tree survey be recent, within 2 years, because trees grow, trees change, and so it requires a more recent survey, because currently you could use a 10-year-old survey if that's what they have. Let's see. And this would also add the penalties. I think it's actually the next one that adds the penalties. Let's see. And so with this amendment, we provide two options. Essentially, I has two options under strict and moderate. One under strict requirements, with replacement trees being a minimum of 4 inches, measured at 12 inches from above the ground and 7 inches in height when. Or the moderate requirement of a sufficient number of trees shall be planted to equal in caliper inch the caliper of the tree removed. Said replacement tree shall have a minimum of 3 inches when planted. The strict requirements were compared to the city of Melissa, and the moderate requirements were, Alondra, remind me which were the moderates come from? The moderate requirement came from Keller. And essentially, mitigation isn't in absence of good site planning. The replacement would only be considered after all design alternatives to navigate around those trees are considered. And so a lot of arguments that are heard, it's that tree surveys are really expensive, especially in the preliminary processes, but tree surveys are also really important. And a lot of people ask why they have to build around trees. And so options are to leave the code as is, or to amend it to specify the requirements of the tree survey unless they can prove it's not needed. This amendment allows for a variance process for a developer to come in and prove that they don't need to do a tree survey for X, Y, Z. Any questions on this one?
What would that XYZ be? No trees?
I'm not, do we know what the requirements would be that would exempt them?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it would be the disease tree or any, correct, yes. Any tree that's not in the protected list?
Okay.
Because currently we only require mitigation for trees on our protected and heritage list.
I'm sorry, Kennedy, who does the survey again?
It will be on the developer.
On the developer?
Yes, to provide the tree survey to staff.
And how are the tree surveyors that they choose vetted to make sure that we're getting an accurate assessment of those situations?
It's required to be from a certified arborist.
And the city has a arborist on staff also.
So that would be, our arborist would be with whoever they choose as well, just to make sure things are good, or would it be?
Yes, their arborist would have to issue a report, and it has a seal, as well as diagrams of what trees, and so we would go out and spot check.
Okay.
So until they do some kind of tree survey, how are they going to know if there are any special trees?
They wouldn't.
So why wouldn't they always have to do a tree survey? Unless you look out, there are no trees, that's obvious, but.
Yeah, it would be the requirement for example, like if you think it's a diseased and dying tree survey, you would be able to prove that it's not required by getting an arborist's opinion, or if a lot of people can tell based on looking at the tree, like it's not on our list.
Okay.
So as of right now, the only mention of the word tree survey on our code is actually in one of our checklists for a public improvement plan. So if your development doesn't go through a public improvement plan, you are not really essentially required to do a tree survey. So that's more of why the tree survey is required, whether it's in a zoning concept scheme right at the beginning. If your property doesn't go through a zoning concept scheme, then it would be at the public improvement plan. If a public improvement plan is not needed, then at that site development plan. But we want to make sure that we we do incorporate it somewhere.
Any other questions on this one?
No, ma'am. Anybody? No? Okay. So, are you done? You have more?
I've got more.
All right.
So the next is the amendment to the preferred plant list. The main one that we are adamant to get added is pecan trees, because currently we do not protect pecan trees. So the current list, it's got a list of canopy trees, accents, grasses, and shrubs. As you can see, pecan is nowhere on there. This is the proposed list that was suggested by the arborist that we had spoken with the additions in red and the strikeouts removing different trees. The main one, the pecan tree, is on there now. And huckleberry, yes. Yes, hackberry. Second column, first in the second column. It depends on which arborist you speak to, whether they like hackberries or they don't. It can be controversial. That is it.
So now attorneys, engineers, and arborists are all going to have a separate opinion.
Mr.
All right.
Chair, could I ask just
Yes, go
make
ahead.
a comment, please? And I guess this is for the city manager. Is it still possible to amend this list before it's, okay.
Yes.
I would make the suggestion, we've got some people from the Master Gardeners, Master Naturalists, Native Plant Society that were good enough to come here and offer some great suggestions. Is it possible to seek their counsel before we come up with a finalized list?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right.
And I have received the list from the naturalists, and we'll be comparing it and adding more.
Awesome, great, thank you.
We got anything else on that?
That's all I got.
All right. So, Ms. City Attorney, question for you. We had another citizen comment come up, or do we go back to citizen comments, or no?
We've already passed that in the agenda.
That's
They
what
said
I
that-
figured as much. Okay, thank you. All right, on to item 4. Updates, future item, future development related items.
The only item that I have is that the council, the impact fee committee, you, with Ms. Nancy added, will be visiting the wastewater impact fee in the coming month. The proposal is to increase the wastewater impact fee by about $3,000, making us probably one of the 3rd highest cities in the area. And that is to offset about 150 million plus wastewater treatment plant expense. And even with that increase, that only offsets about $49 million of that cost. I'm sorry. Which is why I say, if the infrastructure's not there, I'm you know,
Right.
I've got to figure out how to pay for it.
Understandable. Okay. All right, item 4B, individual requests from planning and zoning commissioners that particular items be listed on future agendas. Please, no group discussion. Yes, ma'am, Commissioner Parsons.
There's been a lot of discussion about whether we've talked the B3 code to death, whether we've had enough meetings, whether there's been enough participation, whether there hasn't been enough participation. And I would just like to put out there that we consider other ways of informing the citizens besides social media. I'm not really sure that that's reaching everybody. And again, in the spirit of involving everybody who would like to be involved, I think it's great. We've had so many people come tonight. I think it's a real opportunity for them to understand what we're doing, as well as for us to understand what they're thinking. It would be great if we had people show up every time we had a conversation. But I just don't think that we're reaching everybody. And I'm open to how we could potentially do that. I'm not saying we spend a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering if maybe we could create some kind of citizens group that reaches out to the different communities that are out there that might not be hearing about what we're up to, where we go to them rather than have them come to us at a convention center and I just think that when we start drilling down and talking about some of these particular items, like trees and things like that, I mean, it's one thing for everybody to say, yeah, we want more trees. It's another thing to understand what it is we need to do in order to protect our trees. It's just different. And I'm thinking that if we could somehow reach the communities out there that are not being reached, that it would just make a better place for everybody to live. And I would feel more comfortable voting on something based on what I'm hearing from the community, that they would like to see happen or that they don't like. I just think that it helps us make a more informed decision.
Commissioner Parsons, I don't disagree. I guess I would ask the people that reached out to you, did they show up here tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So when I have discussions with HOAs, because I go to HOA meetings and things, they also have a problem with people showing up. And so, you know, we've been going through this for a year. Social media has a great number of clicks. I'm not sure somebody could tell me today how many viewers are actually online today. How many? 8 actually watching, yes. I don't know how many we had a high of.
It goes up and down.
It had an inordinate amount of shares, so that's probably our best way to reach. I'm certainly open to any other possibility. So yeah, I will welcome any input on how to get more people here.
What if we invited the council to recommend a couple of people, each council member, to create some kind of citizens committee that could, you know, reach out to folks where they are, you know, whether it's a church or whether it's at, you know, the recreation center or wherever it is that they typically participate in things.
Sure, we can explore a more robust outreach program, whether we do that through the churches and the schools. We'll try to work through that. Through the chamber, through the business network, we'll work on that.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anything else? You have that? Do we have anything else? No? All right, it's on you, Doc. Item 4C. What? Yes?
Next meeting.
No.
You do have a next meeting to talk about the comprehensive plan, and that is November 21st, I believe. We are trying to make that a joint meeting with the city council, so you can both decide exactly what the goals are for the city and how we're going to be growing in any particular area. Right now, it's a little bit unfortunate that the master plans are driving the comprehensive plan instead of the comprehensive plan driving the master plans, which is how it should normally function. So we're trying to make that a joint meeting so that you guys have a good, robust conversation with just the two groups.
All right, everybody catch that, right?
November 21st.
Spread the word. This is where we can start it, right here, by
5:30.
informing the citizens, okay? All right. We good now?
Yes.
All right, item 4C.
Good afternoon, Commission members.
Good afternoon.
Here's a typical monthly report for the month of September for permits that we're applying for. Basically have the numbers for you, but at the bottom we have them for you. Building on the far left. At the bottom, I'm going to touch on the highlights of the projects that came on the bigger ones. The first one is a commercial building permit, which is for the Hill RV Park, which was for their clubhouse. The next ones are, there was 4 COs applied for. One is a Skin Care by Lacey, which is a little blue house on Chestnut here. A yoga studio at 918 Main Street. Quality Automotive, which is on top of the hill here at 1911 State 95. It was an existing automotive repair that's been cleaned up and repaired. And then here at 715 Chestnut, next to the art studio, which used to be a flooring place, 2 attorneys took that building over and converting it to attorney's office. And then at St. David's, we had a little interior cosmetic remodel. Going to planning activity, we have a big project as part of future development, and it's, you know, we hear Alta Blakey, Pearl River. This is the property along 71. There at 969, It's Sendero called now in Phase 1, and they're platting the property in different lots, looking at commercial development along the park, or along 71, consisting of Chewy's, Strip Center, et cetera. And then they're at 969 at kind of gateway to Val Verde. There's an existing lot that was brought into the city. They're converting to a retail zoning for convenience store / gas station and small strip center. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. Once again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. It's a great show of participation. Hopefully we have more people like this coming to more meetings. Just try to catch the next meeting and not the next door if you want the factual information, okay? So, anybody want to make it can we get a motion here, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Good night, Bastrop. Have a great night. Thank you.